But we kick it off with news just in. Embattled Western Cape Judge President John Hlophe is heading to stop the National Assembly's impeachment process against him. It comes after the Judicial Service Commission voted he face a hearing for attempting to influence Constitutional Court judges in a matter pertaining to former President Jacob Zuma. Well, I'm joined now by legal journalist Karyn Maughan. Karyn, quite a lot contained in the actual court documents that have been submitted by Judge John Hlophe. I suppose no time yet to actually go through the merits of what he's bringing before the court. But from what you've seen in terms of the summary, what is he arguing there?
Well, essentially, Kath, what he's done is he's bringing an interdict application to stay the implementation of the tribunal report, which was voted on by the JSC, and its recommendation that he face an impeachment vote in the National Assembly and possible suspension by President Cyril Ramaphosa, pending a substantive challenge to the entire tribunal process that saw him found guilty of gross misconduct for attempting to influence those two Constitutional Court justices in 2008. Now, we have some insight into the kind of arguments that he's making because many of them were made by the JSC's minority, of course, who voted against, Judge President John Hlophe facing impeachment, and very much argued that, his discussions with Justices Besin Kabinde and Chris Jafta were not attempts to sway them to rule in favor of Jacob Zuma in a crucial matter involving 93,000 pages of evidence against him in his corruption case, but were simply academic conversations on this issue of privilege, which of course was pivotal to Zuma's case. And they're saying that essentially that John Hlophe, should not have even been found guilty of misconduct, that his innocent discussions have been grossly misconstrued, and that there really is no basis to find him guilty of the kind of gross misconduct which would justify him becoming the first judge in South Africa's democratic history to face impeachment.
When it comes to process, Karyn, we've seen one particular entity being successful in terms of challenging processes in the JSC this year. That would be CASIC in the issue of the appointments of the interviews for Constitutional Court judges. Are we likely to see Judge President John Hlophe challenging the processes of the JSC in terms of how they conducted the investigation into him in the first instance?
Absolutely. I mean, this is he's bringing this case on an urgent basis. So he's basically saying, I fundamentally believe that the process against me was invalid and unconstitutional. And as such, I was wrongly, unfairly, unlawfully found guilty of gross misconduct and now face impeachment. So I want an order from the High Court in Johannesburg interdicting the National Assembly from proceeding with an impeachment vote and interdicting any potential decision by President Cyril Ramaphosa about my suspension until such time as I substantively attack the tribunal process, attack, the entire 13-year long and protracted history of this case, of this matter, of this complaint against me. He has filed an application which is something in the region of about over 500 pages. I mean, obviously at this point we haven't read all of this, but I mean this is a matter which has been mired in attacks on the integrity of the Constitutional Court in bringing the complaint against Judge President John Hlophe. At the time when this first emerged, he claimed it was because he was outspoken about racism within the judiciary and within the legal profession. He did not pursue those complaints in the actual tribunal process, certainly not in cross-examination of the two justices who were the primary witnesses against him. But he may well revive those arguments in this application. And given, rightly as you point out, that the JSC has very embarrassingly been forced to abandon its Constitutional Court justice interview processes because of accusations that they were unlawful and conducted in a thoroughly improper manner. It is going to again find itself at the center of a legal challenge when fundamentally the question is about the exercise of its powers in terms of holding judges accountable. for their conduct, and whether or not that was exercised properly. Of course, the JSC will need to defend its decision, but given that, there was a split on this, there was a minority of 4 members who did not believe that Hlophe should be impeached, it is also going to be a case that exposes those divisions within the JSC itself.
Let's talk about the process that has been unfolding in Parliament. It has been high up on the agenda in terms of the things Parliament needs to actually deal with, and already some indication that there is no desire on the part of Parliament to conduct another inquiry into the charges that the Judge President has been facing in this regard. So what does this interdict effectively mean? It doesn't mean that when Parliament resumes, they can no longer do any kind of work, if of course it's granted in his favor, to talk about actually impeaching them, that this discussion now officially becomes off the agenda for Parliament.
Well, essentially what Parliament's legal advisors have stated is that, because this is not a situation as it would be with the public protector, the judiciary and its accountability is governed by the Judicial Service Commission. An inquiry into these allegations of gross misconduct has been conducted by the JSC. The tribunal found him guilty of gross misconduct. A majority of JSC members, allegedly on a basis of 8 versus 4, has found that there is indeed a basis to impeach or to have an impeachment process unfold in the National Assembly. So as such, Parliament's legal advisors have said it would be a gross breach of separation of powers for the Parliament to then step in and say, oh, well, we're going to have another inquiry process, on top of that, despite the fact that the JSC, which is charged with the accountability of judicial officers, has gone through this process. It is simply a question now of tabling a motion and having a vote. So, it's going to stop the vote from happening. We don't know, Kathy, at this point what the attitude of the ANC would have been to the potential impeachment of John Hlophe, whether or not, what the party political line on is, because clearly this is now falling outside the realms of law in terms of the parliamentary process and firmly into the realm of politics. And we don't at this point have a strong and coherent sense of what the attitude to the ANC would be, because clearly in a 2/3 majority vote context, which is what is required to impeach John Hlophe, it would be essential for the ANC as a body to decide to support impeachment. So what this now means is that vote will not happen if he wins, if he is able to convince the High Court that he does indeed have a basis for getting an interdict, that he will suffer irreparable prejudice if this is not granted, and indeed whether potentially there is a reasonable prospect that he may have some level of success in his application.
Well, Karyn, whichever way we look at it, it looks like this case is going to continue to make legal history.
Absolutely. The reality is that this is the first judge in democratic South African history who's potentially being brought before Parliament to face an impeachment vote. And whatever happens here will have major repercussions, not just for John Hlophe, but for the integrity of the judiciary as a whole, and certainly in terms of the ability of the JSC to hold judges who cross the lines of the Constitution and their mandates and their responsibilities to account.
Legal journalist Karyn Maughan, let's leave it there for tonight.